Hello and welcome to the Nature Garden podcast with me, Carl Steinson, and the weekending show team from Lionheart Radio. Thanks for joining us on a canny wee wander down the garden path and country lane with the birds and the bees and the flowers and trees, and it's a chance to hear some great stories from the past and present. In this episode, Tom Pattinson's fresh back from the Chelsea Flower Show and full of inspired ideas for small garden spaces and containers. Tom Cadwallender's reflecting on a very moist May, and he's in awe at some amazing first ever bird observations in the county. Steve Lowe's looking forward to a right proper celebration for the opening of the Creswell Pele Tower garden. And we hear from pupils from Lowick and Holy Island First School who are taking part in an exciting national gardening initiative. And we've got some top tips for the garden from Tom P, all coming up on the Nature Garden podcast. Containers are a way for all of us to grow plants, flowers and crops to eat in a restricted space. And Tom Pattinson's here, fresh back from the Chelsea Flower Show, with some brilliant ideas for your garden, yard or window.
Hello. This week I wanted to concentrate on gardening in containers. Many people out there love plants, want to surround themselves with them, but sadly, they have no garden. They simply have a patio, a courtyard, a balcony, and they have to grow in containers. But that's okay. There's so many plants these days can grow in containers. You can bring them from tiny plants into maturity and surround yourself with great joy, believe me. There are dwarf fruit trees and bushes available on the market. There are ornamental plants, amazing variety of them, and there are also vegetables. So anything you want, really, if you have the drive to get it, you can within the horticultural world. Where do we get ideas for these? What to plant? How to plan it? Well, visit some flower shows. Visit gardens open near you throughout the summer season, and you're always picking up ideas. I went to the best show in my book in the year a couple of weeks ago at Chelsea Flower Show. As usual, it was absolutely buzzing with activity and plants of all descriptions and from around the world on display there, and absolutely oodles, lots of ideas. There were plants under different headings, and some of the small ones is what I went for. Small spaces, big ideas was one of the themes that recorded in my memory. So, your balcony container can become your haven, but people can see from outside. It's a bare balcony. Of course it is at the moment, but grow one or two choice shrubs, say some bonsai trees, such as, or grow in your form of bonsai in a container, something like Scots pine, or we have beautiful osmanthus in it, which has evergreen leaves and white flowers, highly fragrant, and it flowers in this early spring period, and it's there, and you're completely hidden behind it. So many plants you can make a screen, which you can hide behind, but you can enjoy the presence of and engulf yourself in them, in your balcony. Where do you get the information? Just visit the stands at a local show. A big show such as Chelsea's ideal for that. I looked at some of the examples, and one of them, a designer, was shouting the cause for a water feature in a small space. He talked about a small space being 20 centimetres deep, the pool, and 60 by 60 centimetres wide. That's 2/3 of a foot deep and 2 feet square. 2 feet either side. It said would attract wildlife, frogs, newts, diving beetle, water boatmen, and I believed every word because I have something very similar in the garden at home. Our natural water feature is a preformed pool, which is something in the region of 1.5 meters long and just 2/3 of a metre wide. It's barely 60 centimetres, 2 feet deep, but we've been able to put water in there and various plants around the periphery of it and inside. We've got a water forget-me-not, the tall flag iris, yellow flag iris, which is just starting to flower now, marsh marigolds, which flowered about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we got a sweet flag, commonly called, but it's Acorus calamus. Just grows to about 30 centimetres, a foot tall. Given such limited space, you'd think that water lily, that's the nymphae, water lily, you would think they would be out of the question. But you see, that's where you're wrong. One of the latest introductions is a miniature, a type with miniature leaves and flowers, and it's called Nymphea pygmea helvola. We have a very effective little cordless fountain in the pool as well. It's a round floating device, just 15 centimetres diameter and 5 centimetres deep. It has built-in solar panels and it was sourced online. It's such a simple, inexpensive piece of equipment. It costs around £10 and you should see it. It has different nozzles for the type of jet that comes up through the water once the sun comes out. Oh, this could easily work on a balcony setting, in a courtyard, indoors in the garden room. It's all under control. The fountain, when it comes up, you can easily organise a sanctuary for yourself without soil, without a garden, just using containers in that confined space.
For most of us in the UK, spring has been much wetter than average, and soaking wet March ranks, according to the BBC, in the top 20% of wettest Marches since, well, I don't know when, but you get the drift. The rainy theme has continued into April and May. Tom Cadwallender reports on how this has affected some of our feathered friends at nesting time.
As I sit by the Aln Estuary, recording this latest piece for the podcast, I'm surrounded by black, ominous, rain-laden clouds, and I've just heard some thunder. And you may hear some later during the recording, but it really epitomises this past May. The rain has just been quite unrelenting, and it's had some really quite dire consequences for our breeding birds. Really, it has. It's quite shocking. I'm sure lots of birds will not be successful at all. And it's kind of all nesting birds that we've got, from ground nesting birds, the waders, for example, on the ground, and they're kind of trying to feed their young, and there's the ground soft enough to find food. But unfortunately, they get soaked because these tiny wader chicks, as they wander around, and it's interesting actually, wader chicks are classified as nidificulous. That means they can walk almost as soon as they're hatched. And they wander around, but their feathers aren't fully developed, and the feathers are quite downy. And so they're really not waterproof. So they'll become absorbed and they'll become soaked to the skin quite quickly, and it's a real issue for a lot of these birds. If they've not hatched, the eggs can become chilled very, very quickly. So there's a real problem for the ground nesting birds, but also the underground nesting birds. Species like puffins and shelduck. Puffins are kind of nesting on our offshore islands, and they like to be in rabbit burrows. And I know in seasons gone by where we've had a lot of rain, and the burrows become flooded because these islands that they nest on, particularly the Farne Islands, they're made of kind of the underlying substrate is whinstone, and it's impermeable, really. It's kind of, there's just no drainage through it. So the water lies, and these poor little pufflings that are stuck down the rabbit burrows, they'll just drown. And that happened about 5 years ago, where we lost quite a large number of pufflings in the bad weather. And also species like shelduck. Here on the Alne Estuary, there's almost 40 adults knocking around on the shore. And the number went down a little way about a month ago, and I think some of those birds would have been attempting to nest. They like to nest in old rabbit burrows as well, or little holes in the ground or so forth. And the numbers have gone up again, so I suspect they've been hammered by the rain during May, and so their numbers are going to be heavily depleted. And it's a real big concern. But also it's not just those ground nesting and underground nesting. Birds which kind of nest in bushes and trees. We're talking about the songbirds, the song thrushes, the blackbirds, the blue tits and that sort of thing. Lots of blue tits are in nest boxes, of course, so we can really study them quite closely. But there's all sorts of those birds are going to be really hammered. I'm just thinking about blue tits in particular, because they like to be in nest boxes, as I mentioned, holes in trees. That's where they like to be. And, we're quite familiar with them in our gardens, but they normally feed on seeds and so forth, peanuts. We're quite familiar with them by eating peanuts in the garden. But there's periods of their life where they need to feed on insects, particularly caterpillars, because they need the chicks need a boost of protein very, very quickly, high protein thing. So their nesting is timed to coincide with a lot of caterpillars out on trees. But unfortunately, during the heavy rain, the caterpillars have been washed off trees. So some of the ground feeding birds like robins have actually benefited from that. But the tree feeding birds like blue tits, who need these caterpillars for their young, have not managed to do that. So a lot of the blue tit feeding, or nesting rather, is sort of timed to coincide with the peak hatching of the caterpillars. And so, but if they've been washed off the trees, they can't feed. Interestingly, some of the data that we've been seeing is that some of the early nesting blue tits have got their young off before the heavy rains came in. So the early nesting birds, I think that's kind of general as well, the early nesting birds have really benefited by just being early, whereas the other kind of later birds have just will be washed out. The whole thing is really quite stressful for these birds and for these bird populations. And blue tits, the average lifespan of a blue tit is only about a year, less than a year, because there's so many of them hatched and so many of them perish. Only one or two will actually go on to be adults. So yes, it's a poor old show, and it's a sad old stage of affairs, really. This spring has just been so awful for our wildlife. It is really dreadful. But on a little peak of a note, as I'm sitting by the Alne Estuary, recording this, I've just been accompanied by a barn owl hunting the fields nearby. The barn owl it's very unusual for them to be out during the day hunting. It must be because they've either got young in the nest and they need to feed as much as they possibly can, get out hunting as much as they possibly can, or they've not managed to feed during the evening, during the darkness because of the rain. So they've been forced out as well. So, goodness me, it's a tough old game, this. Nature is really quite a hard old thing. So fingers crossed that we see some kind of improvement in June, so some of these birds can actually get on and get some young raised. Otherwise, it's going to be another kind of awful time. And it's not like me to be pessimistic. Oh, there's some thunder. I can just hear the thunder. So it's not like me to be pessimistic, but yeah, it's all kind of indicating that way. But anyway, folks, fingers crossed for some dry weather coming soon. Let's hope I get home before this rain kind of follows this thunder through.
Inspiration comes in all shapes and sizes and ages, and I was delighted to catch up with possibly the youngest gardeners we've had on the show. Daniel, aged 5, Liliella, aged 8, and Heidi, aged 7, at the Lowick and Holy Island Church of England First School.
Daniel, and my age 5. Liliella, age 8. I believe that we doing the work of gardening. Plant gardening, fruit gardening, and more plants and more fruit.
More plants and more fruits.
Yeah.
Right. That's great, but I think there's a bit of a system here, isn't there, Liliella?
Yeah.
Could you just explain that to me?
So the system is that we are trying to plant different types of herbs and beads and everything, different types of beds. So in the bed that I'm working on, it has beans and peas in it. So far we've planted in my bed some runner beans and dwarf beans.
That's fantastic. Why do you have to have that system? Why can you not just put everything in one bed repeatedly?
Because then it would create some diseases which would possibly stop the growth.
That's absolutely right. And it's also about the nutrients that each different kind of set puts into the soil, isn't it?
Yeah.
Have you noticed something about this soil? I can see some things growing that shouldn't be there.
Yeah, a lot of weeds are growing as well.
There's something else in this garden, but beyond fruit and vegetables. What have we got here, Daniel?
We got some purple flowers. They look good and they look nice.
And what lands on the flowers?
The bees on it and some yellow stuff.
Exactly. So, Liliella, those bees, why are they friends of the gardeners?
Because they make nectar, which will also create honey.
Yeah, and when they go from flower to flower, they help with something called...
Pollination.
That's right, pollination. Excellent. What are you hoping to get out of all of this?
Well, we are hoping to get some food.
Very good, excellent. And Heidi, what have you been doing in the schoolhouse garden today?
I have been planting some sunflowers.
Do you know what kind? Oh, sunflowers. Do you know how big they will grow?
As big as the sky.
Yeah, that's right. Almost as big as the sky. A last word with Mrs. Steinson, the teacher here. So this is a rotation scheme, isn't it?
It is, yes. In the garden we've got 4 raised beds and 1 flat bed, and the idea with the raised beds is that we can rotate what our crops. And in the classroom earlier we sat down with 4 different pieces of paper for the food beds and decided which plants went with each other. So we've got 1 for roots, 1 for salad, 1 for herbs, and 1 for a selection of other things. And then the other bed is, this year we've dedicated the whole flat bed to be a flower garden. So we've got a lovely selection of flowers. We're actually taking part in the RHS Sow and Grow campaign, so we've just received some seeds from the RHS and we've planted them today, and we're going to check when they germinate and when they get their first true leaves and follow them right through until they actually produce their own seeds. So we'll see the whole process of flowers from seed to seed.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mrs. Steinson.
Thank you. It's been lovely to see you here in our beautiful garden on Holy Island.
I love that. As big as the sky. Brilliant. And thanks, Mrs. Steinson and the Holy Island gardening team. Now, making a garden in a limited space can be fun and a bit challenging. And Tom P's going vertical. He's looking at ways to make restricted gardening a success and a joy. Over to you, Tom.
If you're going to construct your garden, your special garden, in a limited space, it's going to be with containers, tubs, large pots, whatever you choose. But 2 things to make sure. Those plants never go short of moisture It's well drained, of course. You put some drainage into the containers, but they must never go short of water, nor must they suffer from a lack of food. You start off with a decent compost, which may well have, or you can put some slow-release fertilizer pellets in, which release the food they require over time. But there'll come a stage in the season where those plants will need feeding as well as watering. So you are responsible for that. The difference between them and plants growing outside in the garden is those outside, they can send out roots deep into the soil and to the side, foraging for food and water. In the pot, confined to a pot, all plants are the equivalent of newborn babies. They're children. They have to be fed. You can't neglect them. Keep that in mind. If your space is limited, which I assume it is, then think going upwards. Think about vertical planting. And one of my favourite plants is the star jasmine. It's evergreen, it's Trachelospermum. It's gorgeous for indoor use, outdoor use, pure little white flowers and highly fragrant. That's one I'd choose for sure, but you make your choice. And there are lots of trailers you can choose from as well. The creeping jenny, Lysomachia, Nummularia aurea is the botanical name for it. Variegated catmint, trailing. Ivy, of course, trailing. Bacopa. You could keep going on. That's your choice. But trailing plants from elevated and trailing down has a great, brilliant effect. You know, over the years, the European countries we've visited, I've been knocked out by the way they use their balconies and confined spaces, blocks of flats with blooms coming all the way around. It really cheers the place up, and I really believe we're catching up with this in our own country at the moment. But restricted planting, grab the ideas you can from visiting other sites, other gardens open to the public, etc. This is the best possible time to be starting to do your planting. Frost is gone, the main frost anyway, it's the end of May, a traditional time for planting out. So get yourself along to the garden centre, make your choice, and create something in that bare space which you think is too small, but you're going to transform it. I've resolved to do that. In Alnwick town, which I'm broadcasting from at the moment, in North Northumberland, we've had for a few years now a competition, and that's run by the Alnwick Garden Town Trust in association with Alnwick and Bloom. They organise a courtyard patio festival. This year it runs over 3 days from the 19th to the 21st of July, and entries are invited for 2 sections. It's a competition, of course, best private or communal courtyard or patio, and the best commercial courtyard or patio. There's a £100 prize. It's offered to the winner of each category. Now, you can get further information on this if you contact this phone number, 07809 467 126. That's 07809 467 126. Or you can email info@alnwickguesthouses.co.uk. And Alnwick in there, it's all lowercase. Alnwick in there is spelt ALNWICK, because Alnwick was formed by the side of the River Aln. But we don't pronounce it Alnwick, we say Alnwick. So info@alnwickguesthouses.co.uk will get you all the information you need on that competition. We have a map outlining the position of courtyard and patio entrance. It'll be available at the time. This allows you to get in behind the scenes, walk around the town and see what people are doing with their courtyards and patios. It's an opportunity to spend a summer afternoon discovering otherwise hidden gems, share the enjoyment of the creators and possibly pick up some ideas, display hints from them. You know, visiting gardens open to the public. You don't realise at the time, but you're ticking out these ideas. You see, oh, I must have that plant. Oh, that's a new variety. Oh, that's the way they're growing it. Get out as much as you can at this time of year and visit other gardens and enjoy it.
Over the last couple of years, we've been hearing from Steve Lowe and volunteers who've been restoring an amazing Northumberland landmark. And this weekend is a very special one for Steve and the Creswell Pele Tower team.
After all of the rain and the wind that we've had over the last few days, it looks like it's set fair for this weekend. And if you've got an hour or two to spare on Sunday afternoon from 2:30 till 4 o'clock, then why not pay a visit to Creswell Pele Tower and the walled garden, more importantly, because this weekend marks the official opening of the walled garden. And nearly 4 years of work has culminated with us actually having a superb venue for this particular auspicious event. Now, we've got music on, we've got artists along, and the tower's open, but more importantly, the garden is now going to be officially open. Now, a few people have been in before and had a sneaky peek, but I'm sure everybody that turns up this weekend will be amazed by the work that's gone into it, but also the result of all of that hard work. Now, our official event is going to be a little bit before that, and we're paying thank you to all of the volunteers who've helped, because it has been a volunteer effort. You'll be amazed though. Not only have we got a riot of colour, and most of the plants have been donated, which is absolutely fantastic, but we have a gazebo, a lovely wildlife pond. We've got our loads of borders with ferns in, lots of wildflowers. We've got areas dedicated to fruit and vegetables, mostly fruit, I have to say, because we're going cordons up the walls, which we now know were officially here in the past. We've got a superb little Elizabethan herb bed, which has been done by a young girl called Thea, and she's designed it and planted it herself. We've got a medieval orchard with a variety of things that you don't see commonly, like cobnut, walnut, almond. We've got mulberry, we've got quince, there are medlar, lots of stuff really that marks the period at which the Pele Tower, which is 14th century, was actually built. But also in recognition of the fact that the garden itself was used for Dig for Victory, and that we've been able to trace back some of the history, that we now know that this was actually built, the garden part of it anyway, was built in around about 1700, 1750, something like that. And then it's been amended in the Victorian period. So there's a lot of history in there as well as the plants. But the main thing is the plants. We decided not to have a kitchen garden, and we, by the way, being the Creswell Pele Tower Trust, we've gone for flowers as much as anything to give it a little bit of colour, and it's alive with insects, by the way, and we've managed to record 37 species of bird 2 weeks ago in one day, which is incredible for the size of it. I would urge people to come along. It's free of charge to come in to both the Pele Tower and the garden. Donations obviously welcome. We've even produced a fantastic little book called Our the Wall, which is the story of the Creswell Pele Tower, and that's available for £3. 100% of that goes back into looking after the garden, because the project itself has been largely supported by players of the National Lottery. And we've got a fair amount of money from them towards this project. So it'll be no surprise that it's actually officially being opened by Chris Mullen, who was actually the chair of the lottery, and he lives in Northumberland, is a local writer, former MP, and we're delighted to have him coming along. We've also got members of the Creswell family, and we've been able to invite people who've had an involvement with the garden as well. So that'll be superb from our point of view. I think anyone who comes in, I have to say, the first words are wow. And it is a wow factor. And it's a community project. So, for instance, today, which is Thursday, I've had 15 members of the local community come along for a special day to help us tidy up, in addition to the volunteers that we normally have, which is brilliant. And let's hope that more people come along in the future and they enjoy this little venture and find a way to be involved. We're hoping it'll be open 7 days a week. We haven't confirmed that yet, but we certainly have a gardening group on a Tuesday and a Thursday morning from 9 till 12, which people are free to come along and give us a hand. And the Pele Tower itself is open on other days when the garden will also be open. You'll find all those details on the Creswell Pele Tower website. Also, we have a Facebook page, lots more details, but please come along and enjoy the garden. Would love to see you.
Birders across the northeast have been getting very excited during the last couple of weeks, and Tom Cadwallender is here to tell us more about some unexpected visitors.
Back of last week, I got a call from a friend to say there's this rare bird has turned up in a private site on Tyneside, middle of an industrial area, but it's a small nature reserve. And they were trying to arrange access to it. So that got my kind of interest piqued quite significantly. And then when they told me what the species was, which was a rustic bunting. Now, rustic bunting is a bird from an awful long way east and kind of breeds in Siberia. And it got me going. And the bunting, it's not a very big bird. It's only about 5 inches long, but it's a male. It was an adult male, and it's got a white stripy head and this chestnut rusty sort of band around its shoulders, and it's quite a super little thing, and I was quite excited about it. And so when the call came through the next day to say yes, the bird had been refound and we've got permission to go. So I scooted down. I was down there on Tyneside, and it's an hour plus drive for me from where I live near Alnmouth. And we got there, and yes, the bird was still showing. It was early morning, and the bird was still showing. So this was the first rustic bunting I've ever seen in Northumberland. It's the old county boundary of Northumberland, which stretches right down to the River Tyne as the southern border. So we're quite traditional in what we think. But anyway, I got to see this bird. It was fantastic. So it's a new bird for me in Northumberland. I have seen one before in the UK, and that was on Fair Isle in 1978, I think it was. And so Fair Isle is a small island in between Shetland and Orkney, which kind of gathers up rare birds. But this was really good. And the last time I saw rustic bunting was actually in China. So we a group of pals had decided to go to this island off Bedaha on the just south of the Korean Sea, and it was this island is called Happy Island. But during migration times, particularly spring migration times, it attracts huge numbers of birds which have wintered further south in Southeast Asia, and they're heading north into northern Russia to breed. And so fantastic. So I saw rustic bunting there amongst many other species of buntings. So yes, it was quite a nice sort of closing that circle. It was absolutely brilliant. But the last couple of weeks has just been quite phenomenal on the east coast of Britain, and Northumberland has not missed out on anything. And about 10 days ago, there was a call came through about a golden oriole, and golden orioles are fabulous looking birds. The males are yellow, golden yellow, with black wings and a little bit of black on the eye. But this one had been well photographed, and it wasn't until a little bit later that people realised actually it wasn't just a European golden oriole, it was an Indian golden oriole, which is quite bizarre. So what it is, there was this the Indian, African and European golden oriole were all the same species until about 10 years ago. Then some scientists, some taxonomists had been doing some work and decided they were separate species, so they were split. So now we have European, African and Indian golden orioles. So the Indian golden oriole, how you tell the difference is kind of the wing length is slightly longer, but also it has a little bit more black behind the eye. And the photograph showed this. So if this turns out to be an accepted record of an Indian golden oriole, it'll be the first record for Europe. It was incredible. So yes, so exciting that. I didn't see that bird. But then the call came through again about a green warbler on Holy Island. Again, Holy Island's the place, And the green warbler is a little Phylloscopus, a little leaf warbler, just like the willow warblers and chiffchaffs. So the little kind of green birds, as the name suggests, green warbler. And they're only sort of about 4 inches long, so they're tiny little things. And the nearest green warbler gets to us is into eastern, kind of far eastern Europe, into Georgia. I've seen them in Georgia. So that was quite exciting. That's a first record for Northumberland, only about the 10th record for the UK. Fantastic. So that got my excitement up. So on Monday, Bank Holiday Monday, I decided to go to Holy Island to do a bit of migration watching, because we've had an unprecedented run of easterly winds, and it just looked so good that more rare birds were going to turn up. I didn't see any rare birds, but what I did see was a pine flycatcher and a sparrow flycatcher. Now, these birds are on migration, so these birds are going an awful long way north before they get to their breeding grounds. And by coincidence, on Tuesday, I went down to a little bit of ancient oak woodland on the southern border of Northumberland. And it's an area I've never been to before. Not very many places I haven't been to in Northumberland, but this place I hadn't been to before. And in there were singing wood warblers, which are like the green warbler, but they're quite unusual for us now because they're particularly habitat specific. But also, there were singing pied flycatchers in there. These birds have been in their breeding grounds for the last 3 weeks. So they are actually settled in their breeding grounds, as contrast to the pied flycatchers that we saw on Holy Island, which were birds for heading north. It just had an interesting sort of contrast for me about the different populations of where birds are coming from. So yes, there's the winter in a similar place, but they nest in completely different places. So one group of birds will nest in oak woodlands in northern England, whilst another group will actually nest in oak woodlands in northern Scandinavia. Just shows you what a magical thing bird watching is. So exciting. You're never sure what on earth's going to turn up. Indian golden orioles, rustic buntings from far east. Goodness me, it's great fun. I love bird watching. Is just the best.
And so, to the sound of War Blackbird, here's Tom with some things to be getting on with in the garden.
So it's jobs for the week time. Frost's gone, at least the severe frosts. We just got into June. Traditionally, this is summer planting out time. And I planted the sweet peas out a few weeks ago because they're really tough on the climbing of canes. I'm already tying them to the cane's supports. Through time, they'll start clinging on a while themselves. 2 ways of growing them, really. You grow them for those large stems, beautiful individual flowers for a vase or for entry at the local flower show. Or you can just plant a few and let as many as they wish climb up the stems and just pick smaller flowers, beautifully fragrant, whichever way you do it, throughout the summer. If I'm planting for those beautiful big blooms, I simply tie a single sweet pea to a single cane. So I've got wigwam style, long wigwam style, 10 canes each side of the divide. So I've got 20 separate plants there. Problem is, it's time consuming. By the time you tie them to the cane, and you also remove the side shoots, but I do it that way anyway, so they should be fine out there. I'm looking at the chrysanthemums. I was about a fortnight ago. Now I'm monitoring them outdoors. They're really tough. They were hardened off anyway. Young chrysanthemums, again, if you want a spray of flowers on the top, pinch out the centre anyway. When they're young, under about 30 centimetres tall, don't let them get beyond that. Pinch out the growing tip and you get 3 or 4 different stems starting off. As those stems grow, if you want a single large flower at the top of each one, then you disbud. You get a cluster of 5 buds at the top generally, and remove the side ones carefully and leave just the central one. That has got a single stem supporting a single bloom, so you'll get a large one. If you let all those buds continue, you'll get bunches of little smaller flowers, which are lovely for decoration anyway. So there's 2 options again when you're planting chrysanthemums out. I'm planting the winter veg out at the moment. The brassicas, the leeks, the cabbages, the winter cabbages, etc. And I've seen 1 or 2 cabbage white butterflies flying around, so the net is over them. It's the only way to protect them. Loose net over them to stop the butterflies getting in, laying those eggs, and of course the larvae of those eggs, when they hatch out, denuding and leaving a mess on your winter vegetables. So that's worth thinking about. I'm looking at the strawberry bed as well. There's young strawberries have formed. Some of them are thumb size, but the size of a thumbnail rather. And the blackbirds are looking in there. So again, I have a framework over the strawberry beds and nets will go over the top of those now. Sometimes they're naughty, the blackbirds. They'll have a peck at the fruits before they're even near ripening. And that's such a waste. In the greenhouse, I'm feeding the tomatoes. We feed the tomato plants. I feed them weekly with a liquid feed. And before I offer the feed, I water the plants so that so that the soil is moist, and then put the feed in afterwards. It accepts the liquid food then. That's a general one, which I must pay attention to, because tomatoes are really strong feeders. Watering as well. Sometimes at the height of summer, you're watering twice daily. As they're growing, the tomatoes, look out for the side shoots. They take all the goodness away of. They're feeding, they're pinching the food that should be going into the fruits and increasing the fruit size. So, and it lets a flow of air go around the plant, the tomato plants, which avoids mildew and fungal diseases. So, pinch out the side shoots as they grow. Vines. I've got my vines in the greenhouse as well, 2 vines, and they're producing a lot of side shoots. And if you get too much growth, there's a still air surrounding the plant and moisture, and it's common to get moulds at this time of year, and you don't want mould on the grapes even before they're ripened. So I remove those side shoots every day. There's never a dull moment in this garden. June drop. Look out for it. We're into June now. Naturally, if an apple tree is carrying far too many fruits, some of them just drop off. It's a natural phenomenon. Wait until the end of June. If you thin out the fruits, you'll get fewer but bigger apples on the tree. But let nature do it for you first. And if you're not satisfied with what nature's done, pop in yourself and remove a few more, thin them out. No hedge trimming, by the way, not yet. The birds are still nesting. They're going to second broods in my garden within the shrubs and the surrounding hedges. So leave the hedges until next month at least. You'll soon cut them. You'll soon get them under control again. Wow. Such a lot to do, isn't there? Whatever you're doing, enjoy your gardening.
You've been listening to gardener Tom Pattinson, birder Tom Cadwallender from the British Trust for Ornithology, and Steve Lowe from the Creswell Pele Tower, and to Mrs. Heather Steinson and pupils from the Lowick and Holy Island Church of England First School. We'll be back with more nature, gardening and heritage reports from Northumberland and beyond in a couple of weeks' time. And don't forget, you can listen back to all of our previous programmes via the Nature Garden podcast. I'm Carl Steinson. Thanks for listening and enjoy your gardening and time outdoors with nature. Bye for now.